accepted, challenge accepted. Reality is always challenge accepted. Challenge accepted, challenge accepted. Reality is always challenge accepted.
Our next speaker comes from the seaside city of Varna. And while most people go to the sea to relax, he spends his time writing JavaScript.
He's the author of books on Node.js, JavaScript, and React, a long-time open source contributor and frequent international speaker.
Today, though, he's going to show us something that might sound like a paradox. Using React without using React.
It's all about principle behind React. Components, declarative UI, smart state management, but applied with plain old vanilla JavaScript.
So whether you're a front-end dev, full stack, or just curious how to build React-style apps without importing the library, this session is for you.
Please welcome to the stage from Varna, Bulgaria,
Krasimir Tsonev!
Okay. So, yeah, I don't know. There's something weird happening. Your keyboard cannot be identified. Back. Quit. Where is this? Where's display?
I don't know, I'm not Mac.
Is there a QA in the room?
So, since I feel a bit like I'm at the Oscars, I want to first thank to my wife for being always next to me, to my parents. Display. Ето нещо, something with the mirroring is not okay. Displays. Дай се HDMI направо, не стане.
Да помагаме, но за съжаление няма място там.
More people.
Няма нужда.
That's weird.
Maybe we could start with the questions and then come back to the talk.
То въобще не го разпознава, всъщност. Чай пак ще го пуснем. Ето би трябвало. Dai, mai online.
Now you see using React without using React in real life.
No, it's. I think it's okay now. It's coming. The full screen, though. Okay.
Woo! Please applaud Krasimir Tsonev!
Sorry about that. Okay, cool. So, as you find out, I'm Krasimir Tsonev. I'm first father of two. This is me and my kids a week ago in Italy. But because I'm trying to be a tough dad, and my kids, they saw this picture, and I don't want to be, I want to be strong. So this is me on the second ride of this train, just trying to be the badass. So I wrote these books. Don't buy them. It's maybe only the last one. The others are really outdated, so it doesn't really make sense. I just joined recently at this company called Krasi. It's here in Sofia. We're building some apps with React in the insurance sector. So today I'm going to talk about lessons which I learned in the world of React, which I actually started using outside of React. Because sometimes I have to build apps which are basically done with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and I realized that I started to think as a React developer, even though they're not using React. So this is a small app which I did. I click the button, wait a bit to get the data. I get the JSON, then I populate this drop-down, I pick something from the drop-down, and then I render a little bit of text and some characters from the show. So if we look at this screen, and if we have to think about what kind of markup we have, then it will be something like this. And immediately, if a React developer starts looking at this markup, the thing that the React developer does, and including me, is basically trying to recognize components. So I'm seeing this H1 tag, and I immediately think, okay, this could be just a title. I'm seeing this grid kind of section. Then I'm just creating grid and grid item. And then I'm seeing this like a character portion of the page. So I create a character component. So this is the main thing which comes with React. And this is why maybe React scales so well. It's so popular. It works for big and small teams. It's because it's based on component-based architecture. And this is the very first thing which people start doing when they work outside of React. They basically start thinking about components. What kind of things we have on the page and how we could create different components. And the component has input, has output. There's something in the middle, which is like the life cycle. And of course, there's this composition enabled by the framework. But if you don't use React, what you could do is just use functions. And in fact, you could achieve absolutely the same thing. So here in this example, we could see that I have props, like the columns at the top. I have children, and this is purely just an idea. It's not really the framework doing it. It's me just creating functions and calling functions, and they return markup. And I could achieve absolutely the same composition by using this idea of having components, the idea of having children, and then nesting different components. So this is the first thing that you could just use outside of React. It's just simple functions. And this is the function, kind of like the render function, which combines everything. Has these props, and yeah, we could see the mapping. Then you return the character component. So it's basically the same. So what about the JSX? When the JSX came in the beginning of React, all people were kind of really against the idea because I'll be mentioning the separation of concerns, but basically people are against writing markup together with the logic, together with the styles, everything is just in one place. And step by step, people realize that this is actually a pattern which really works well. And what JSX is just a syntax sugar. It's something that we write, then we use some sort of a tool, which is like a bundler, a compiler, or transpiler, or it depends how you call it. But what this tool is doing is reading our source code, and it's transforming this JSX elements to something else. By default, it's React.createElement. So the code above is actually absolutely the same as the code below. The code below is the one that we ship to the browser. So now, if you don't use React, can I still use JSX? And yes, we can. I strongly recommend a tool called ESBuild, mainly because it's really small, it's really fast, and it's not. It doesn't involve any other things than just reading the code, transpiling it, and maybe bundling if you want to be bundled. But it's purely about transforming your code from a TypeScript or JSX to just valid JavaScript. And there is one little one option to the configuration of this tool, and this is called JSX Factory. So I could, by default, it's React.createElement, but I could add whatever I want. So if I add banana dance, then what happens with the code below is what I get at the bottom of the screen. And what I get is actually just a function calls. So it's just up to me what this function is doing. And I could implement my own logic about rendering, my own composition. Usually it's just composition. People don't deal with virtual DOM and stuff on their own because it's too complex. But you could create some JavaScript JSX files. You could still use JSX, and then at the end you just like concatenate strings, and you receive HTML for your page. During my practice, I saw some weird cases about using JSX, and this is one of them. Clearly, someone was a bit too excited about writing JSX, and these people were writing CSS using HTML, which was a bit weird. More valid use case was when the company was using Express.js as a node server, but they really liked how React Router is defining the different routes. Of course, they didn't have React, so they decided to use JSX and just transpiled stuff with ESBuild. And you could see below the JSX factory function is just this R function. And of course, they implemented what's in there. So the separation of concerns in React was a topic in the very beginning. And it's touching a lot on how you build apps if you're not using a framework. Back in the days, this was a really big thing. A lot of people, are, including me, we are advocating about separation of concerns, meaning you put your templates in one place, then you put your logic, your styles in different places, and you manage all these three things in a different way. When React came, this all became into one single component. And this was kind of like a shock for a lot of people. They were against this framework, this library, because of that. But to be honest, during the years, I realized that actually React helped a whole generation of developers to separate better. Because nowadays, when you write React components, you don't really put everything into one place, into one single component. You still write components which are purely about styles. You still write components which are about logic, about templating. So in this example, you could see how I have the styles at the top. I have some logic in the middle. This get products function is fetching something from somewhere. And at the end, I have this markup which I kind of compose and render based on the data and the state. So now here we there is no separation of concerns. Everything is just in one place. But no one is writing React like that. It's usually you either extract this get products into a custom hook, for example, or it's just not there. It's a function that you add at the top. The styles are actually exported into a button component, and this function becomes something like this. Because, yeah, you want everything to be manageable. So people started following separation of concerns, not because they know where it comes from, not because they know the pain that we felt before, but this is because just how the React development is made nowadays. So just behind the scenes, actually React is advocating about separation of concerns, and people started implementing these patterns and ideas, not because of the problems in the past, but because it's better and it's scaling, and yeah, there are a lot of benefits of doing stuff like that. It's just more manageable. So there is definitely not a problem with separation of concerns, and in fact, I think React is contributing to this idea. And if you go outside of React, the companies, they start thinking this way. They see, oh, I have styles, maybe I have components, like a design library. I'll develop all my stuff into a place which is, okay, I have a button, I have a title, I have components for text and everything. So it is separated. It is. What about the control flow? So this little app which I showed you, it starts with a button on the top left. Then you click the button, there is this spinner which is showing a message loading, get the data, render the select. Then we click something of the select and we re-render the page. So this is basically the flow of this little app that I did. And if I have to describe this into a list of steps that happen, it's something like that, like rendering the button, handling the click, fetching the data, rendering, handling change, rendering again. So if I go out of React, and in fact, if I didn't use React so far, I could start doing some vanilla JavaScript with this. At the top, I just use inner HTML. I place some HTML into some DOM element. Then this DOM element triggers a function. I get the data. I have another function which renders my select element on the page. And then I change something of the select and I re-render again. So this is the so-called imperative programming. Without React, the declarative programming wasn't really that popular. And everyone was writing front-end using imperative code, which means that you're basically not only saying what will happen, but you are doing it yourself. You write all the code yourself, you change DOM elements, you swap DOM elements, you change the content of the DOM elements, you change the styles yourself. While when React came, it's kind of preached this idea about declarative programming, where you just describe how the UI should be at some point of the time based on the state. And this idea, I can't tell you how many people are just thinking this way. They don't know any other way of writing front end. They know that there should be a state somewhere, and they know that if you have a UI, it's just based on, it's a function of the state. So you change the state, then you change the UI. This is kind of injected into their brains, and this is how they think. So if I have to change this example with imperative code with declarative programming, then I have this state thing, which keeps all the variables of my app, which is like the loading flag, the data, and the selected show. And then I have a function which is changing the state, and it's calling render. And then I have in the render function, based on state, I render everything. So this is now, I'm doing the same thing that React is doing in a declarative way, but I'm writing it with the new JavaScript. And it's not that difficult. You could see that these are like 30 lines of code, and I'm just doing fine. So one direction data flow is something really, really important, and it's done in every single component, on a really small level. If you look at your React tree, every single component is basically following this, because when you state in your components, this is what happens. When you state on your application level, this is what happens. And people, they think like that nowadays. So this is together with the idea of having components-based architecture. Maybe this is the second thing which is introduced with React, and people just learn and they use everywhere without thinking. Even if you put someone which is spent years writing React into an app which is not written in React, they will definitely try to implement something like this, because it's really easy to reason about. It's really easy to think, to fix bugs, to see what's happening. It's just, yeah, it makes the app really simple. So, yeah, I'm showing how it works. What about state management? So I could make a whole talk, maybe even more, maybe a whole conference about state management, because we know that state management is something which usually is, they say, the most difficult thing in front-end programming, and it is, in fact it is. But what I got from React is not about how to manage state. It's more about the approach about state management, basically looking at what kind of state you have. This is basically the key thing. You have to realize what kind of state you have, and then you find the tools to deal with it. And last couple of years, people actually stopped using that much of a libraries, but they started using only React about state management, because you may have state on some really small component about showing and hiding a text. So this is a local state, then you have a form which have more state, then you have application state, which is configuration, whether the user is authorized or not. So it's really about separating different types of states and knowing where to manage the state. It's not about tooling. And this has nothing to do with React or any other library. It has to do with just how you write front-end. And I hope more and more people will start thinking about state management this way, not about throwing Redux everywhere and keeping everything into your context at the very top. Just manage the state by just looking at the state. And if you write vanilla JavaScript apps, you just could use the same approach. You don't have to put everything into a global store, for example. So Redux is definitely something which came with React, but we all know that you could implement it with 13 lines of code, and I bet that most people did it. This is the same like Flux when came back in the days. This is just a pattern. And this is the beautiful thing in React, I think. It's a library with really thin layer of like API. There are not so many things to do, but there are different patterns which the library teaches, and you could just get these patterns and apply them without the library itself. So now I'll do a simple demo, and I'll show you how the React developer thinks and how the React developer does a front-end app. So let's say that I'm a senior React developer and I have to do a form. So the form starts with something like this. I have a little input field, some radio buttons, but because it doesn't look really nice, I need some space around my elements. And what every developer does when he or she needs space is just adding break tags, right? This is how we make space around the elements. And really quickly, this is a bit ugly. So people just start using diffs everywhere. Because the diff is a DOM element, everything is just now on a new line. So that's cool, but because I'm a React developer, I need to write some styling, right? And I'm not going to use just CSS, I'm going to use Tailwind. So I start adding classes here and there, and I add 17 classes to this diff element to make it a button. Yeah, so just typing. And at the end, this register will become a really nice button. So this is all cool, but then when I go to these radio buttons, when I click them, they're not exclusive, right? So I can't even click on the labels. So here I'm going to use my React power skills and basically implement some state management. I'll use the state tools of React, and I'll add a bunch of handlers to apply click events to my elements. So now I'm able to click, and everything is working just fine. Then I can't click on the yes and no. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to wrap this yes and no into a span tags, and I'm adding more events, so I change the state more. And now everything seems like it's working. Of course, I have to add click handler to my div element because this is a button now. And yeah, I'm done. So do you think that this is a cool way of building apps using React? Do you think that it's the right way of doing it? No, right? And it's not. And this has nothing to do with React. It has to do with the web and how web works. So the way to go from here is basically to use a form element first, because you're building a form, and most people don't know what this changes, but it changes a lot. There are elements which, when you put them into the form element, they actually provide more functionality. They work in a different way. The next thing will be to maybe use field set for the different sections of the form. And I don't know if it's visible enough, but the browser actually renders these nice sections. So it's even kind of grouping these elements. Then the next thing that we do is that we kill all this crap about state management. This is just insane. This is basically the React developers implementing what the browser is doing already. So when we remove the state management, we could just add name property of the input radio elements, because if the name property is equal everywhere, these two elements, they are grouped, and so I could click one and the other, and they are exclusive. Then if I want to be able to click on the labels, then I just add another nice element called label, and I wrap these guys into kind of this grouping, and so I'm able to click here and there. And last but not least, I don't really need to write a div instead of a button. I know that this sounds ridiculous, but I could tell you that I'm still seeing this. People are writing divs everywhere. They copy-pasting snippets from Tailwind. They style their buttons this way, and everything seems fine. And it's not. It's not because the page is it's not accessible. We're not talking even about that. It's because it doesn't work like that. Because the tabbing doesn't work, and then you fall into the case where you want to actually fix the tabbing then on the page. Like even now, for example, I could go to the radio button and I use the keyboard on my laptop to switch between the options. So think about how if you don't use just web, you have to re-implement all this on your own, which means attaching a handler about catching the keystrokes of my keyboard, understanding that, oh, this is the left arrow, this is the right arrow, then I switch the state, and it's so much work for something which the browser is already doing. And of course, the submit handler. Now, because I'm using a button, and because the type attribute of button has a default value of submit, and if you put a button inside a form, this button acts as something which submits the form. So all we have to do is just to attach a handler to the form, saying on submit, and then we handle whatever happens to the form. So all this is here, this example is here just to kind of show you that even though React is really cool and it makes your life easier, you don't really have to use it, and you have to know and know everything about it, or maybe have to use it every time. Some time ago, I had the chance to help to the company hire new front-end developers, and maybe out of 100 people, the majority of them, they didn't know web. They knew only React. And this picture I generated with ChatGPT is illustrating really well how people just get the elevator every time. They take the shortcut to, oh, let's build the app, okay, we'll throw Vite, and then we'll just build the app really quickly. And they copy-paste a bunch of stuff from Tailwind website about some ready-to-use components, and they throw them there, some glue code, and it's done. And very soon, when something more complicated comes, people just can't handle it because they don't know the platform. So don't take the elevator, take the stairs, because every stair is actually will make you a better developer. I believe that knowing the fundamental of what you're using is really, really important. So don't skip the HTML, CSS because it's boring or it's not a language. Yeah, it's not, but you have to learn how to write semantically proper code. You have to know what the CSS specificity is. You have to know how to write CSS without using just Tailwind. I'm not even talking about the basic JavaScript APIs in the browser, like the history API, or how to read a cookie or something. Try building apps with just vanilla JavaScript. It's good that React is teaching concepts and patterns, because then you could take all this stuff and just use them in just vanilla JavaScript. And they work. They work because they're really, really simple. This is one of the reasons why in the past I didn't really, I didn't feel that Angular, for example, is my thing, because Angular was teaching APIs. It's indeed enterprise software. It's better maybe for bigger companies. But when you learn something in this context, you can't apply it into other world. And all these years, maybe they're, I don't know, maybe 8 years I'm writing React apps. And all the stuff that I know, I could just use them in my vanilla JavaScript apps and they work, because this is just patterns. And this is the beauty of the library. So use React when you go there, but use the stairs first. Learn the basics. I believe this is much better for you and for your career. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Krasi. Any questions?
Maybe,
What's that?
maybe in the speaker's corner?
We have time for questions. It's okay. We have 4 minutes for questions here. If are there any questions from here? Okay, so the questions will be asked in the speaker's corner. And now let's send off the stage our friend Krasi. Krasimir Tsonev!